So what is the differentiator from a high performer, right, that consistently produces results versus an average performer? And I would say that has to do with the amount of time and the number of times that they drift on a regular basis. So what is drifting and how is it preventing performance in your life and in your business? My name is Skylar Lewis and this is the Christian Business Mentor Podcast. Let's dive in. We're gonna start with the conversation of identity. Everybody's familiar with what a thermostat is, right? So you have a thermostat, and this thermostat has multiple different set points. And what is the role of a thermostat? The role of a thermostat is to manage the temperature. So if you set the temperature at 73 degrees, the temperature stays there. And now if it happens to increase, if it gets to 76, what does the thermostat do? It kicks on and it starts to cool the room down. Same thing if it actually drops in temperature, it will kick the heater on and get the temperature back up. So it manages the temperature, keeps it in a line with whatever it is set at, its set point. And so the thermostat, what's interesting is we all have an internal thermostat. And so the internal thermostat, what its responsibility is its responsibility is to keep you at the same level, whether that's in your marriage, whether that's financially, it keeps you to where you don't drop too low, but it also keeps you from reaching the heights that you're capable of. And so it's built into every human being. And what typically happens is as you start to create more success, let's say you get to 80 degrees, then 90, now you're at 100 degrees, right? Which might represent maybe success, financial success. So you're killing it in business. You are creating more success than you ever have or your professional career. So what happens is as you heat up, if you have not adjusted your identity, and if you have not shifted your identity to match your new current reality, what will happen is the thermostat will kick on and it will find a way to get you back down to where you were before. And so we see this so often, people that win the lottery, right? They'll go win millions of dollars and they'll find a way to lose it all, but they'll usually always end up back where they were if they were making 30, 40, 50 grand a year, whatever that was. And so your internal thermostat is going to basically cause you to sabotage yourself. And many times the sabotage doesn't happen in the arena that you're creating the success. So let's say you're creating success financially in business, maybe you'll have a marriage issue or you'll have a fitness injury. Something will happen, something will sabotage to the point where it actually negatively affects your career and then causes you to get back down to where you were. Now, this happens also in marriage. In marriage, when you're doing very, very well, all of a sudden you decide to take your foot off the gas. When you're investing on a regular basis, you're doing date nights, you first meet your wife, you start to get comfortable, and then you start to pull away from doing the things that got you to where you are now, which is a form of sabotage and a form of your body cooling itself down. So this is going to happen in fitness. Let's say you're used to working out 1 day a week or no days a week, and you start working out 5 days a week. You're going to be on fire, right? You're going to be killing it. And your body, you have to understand that your body will naturally want to find a way to get back to where you're working out 1 day a week again. It's built into you as a human being. So part of your job is identity management. It's managing, it's increasing, it's elevating your identity to match the success that you want in any of the 4 pillars: faith, family, fitness, or finances. That is basically what's happening at every moment. So we want our identity to match the future version of ourselves. And so what happens is there's 4 primary components of identity. So you have your identity. How do you increase your identity? What are the 4 primary components that if you do these things will increase your identity to keep you now at operating at 100 degrees? So number 1 is your faith. It is your identity in Christ, what Christ says about you. Now, this can be directly tied into the Bible. So if you look up identity in Christ on Google, there'll be a ton of verses that are specifically designed to show who you are in Christ. And you can lean in and accept and embrace that reality, embrace that new identity. So number 2 is your associations. The people that you spend the most time with determine who you actually become. right? The 5 people that you're most connected with, eventually you start to adapt some of their mindsets, some of their behaviors. Those guys are waking up early, maybe you start waking up early. Those guys are going out drinking at night, right? Maybe you're going out drinking at night with them, which could affect other things. So your associations play a huge role in the success of your life. Hence why we developed and built Rise Up Kings. It's the largest community of Christian entrepreneur men that are out there. So associations are such a critical aspect of your identity. You'll eventually rise or you'll drop. Number 3 is affirmations. So the things that you tell yourself on a regular basis. If you say, I'm not good with details or I'm not good with numbers, and you eventually ingrain that in your brain will literally shut off when math problems show up. So the things that you say to yourself on a regular basis determine what you believe about yourself. So affirmations are very critical. I've done a couple videos on affirmations. A lot of people slam affirmations. Man, affirmations have been so profoundly powerful to me, especially when they're scriptural affirmations. So I used to be horrible at details, and then I read for 3 years straight, I am a details man. I love the details. I'm a details man. And eventually I started to notice, interesting, like I'm actually pretty detailed. And I got feedback from people like, hey, Skylar, your events are so detailed. And I started to say, okay, interesting. So maybe I am a detailed man. And I eventually became that version. And so I have a huge list of affirmations that I've actually become, that I save, I show at some of my events. So affirmations are a critical part of molding your identity. And number 4 is your behaviors or your habits. The things that you do on a regular basis determine what you believe about yourself. If you work out 5 days a week and you've been doing it for a year straight, you will eventually believe that you're a disciplined man. You will eventually believe that you're consistent. Your habits really determine your identity. So if you can stick with a habit long enough, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it's heating up and it feels if you can stick with it long enough, that can eventually become a part of who you believe you are. I'm a consistent man. I'm a disciplined man. I am a focused man. I'm a loving man. I'm a compassionate man. Like whatever specific identity shift you want to have within yourself, you can have that, but it's going to take some work. So these are the 4 components of identity. And from identity, I'll do this briefly, from your identity really drives all of your life results. Because from your identity, you actually start to behave differently. Then you start to feel different. And then that shifts your life results. So as you start to believe that you're a disciplined man or a consistent man, you start to actually act more consistent in other areas of your life, naturally. Then you produce different emotions, right? You start to feel great about yourself, and it shifts your character, and then you actually produce different life results. And so your identity is the core, like the most important thing you can work on when working on yourself in personal development is your identity, who you believe you are. I hope you're enjoying this video. I'm the founder of Rise Up Kings, the largest faith-based personal development organization in the country. And it's our mission to reach as many people as possible to help them live lives of excellence, all to glorify God. We do this through our content that you're watching now. We do this through our seminars. So if you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Let's get back to the video. Okay, that was the identity portion of this. Now let's talk about what actually ends up happening with drift. So as you're creating success in your life, right? You're building, you're working out more than you have, you're investing in your marriage more than you have, you're doing all the things that you know will produce more results, and you're creating success. What's going to eventually happen is you're going to hit a plateau. Something's going to happen that is going to trigger you. And it's usually an emotional trigger. Your wife's going to say, hey, you know, all that work that you're doing, I don't really think that you're going to be able to do that long term. You've started things before, but you haven't finished them. Boom, trigger. Creates frustration, anger, insecurity, whatever it may be. Or maybe you get an injury and it triggers you. Or some issue at work, you get a lawsuit, right? And then you get emotionally triggered. And so some trigger will happen, typically an emotional trigger. And what that does is it sends you into a drift. And that drift, how do you know when you are in a drift? You know when you're in a drift when you're not doing the things that you know you should be doing. Right? If you know you should be working out 5 days a week, that's what you committed to, but then all of a sudden you stop working out. The day that you stop working out is the day the drift is starting. The day that you stop doing what you said you were going to do is the day the drift is starting. And what tends to happen though is the drift, it'll send you out on a drift, and then what happens is you hit this long-term drift. It's more of a longer-term drift, and this is what actually zaps performance. So these drifts for many people, for me, my drift used to be 3 to 6 months. I'd stop working out for 3 to 6 months. I'd stop waking up early for 3 to 6 months. I'd start eating unhealthy for 3 to 6 months, a bunch of bad food or sugar, whatever it may be. Like I stopped doing the things. And so it put me into a significant drift. And so I used to do 3 to 6 month drifts. But what I found is, man, it really affected my performance. When I was not waking up early and eating poorly, it was affecting the way I showed up at work. So what I started to do is I started to shorten the time frames of the drift. So I brought it to 1 month. Then I eventually got my drift to a week. And then I eventually got my drifts to a day. Now my drifts are typically about 1 to a couple hours. So if I get into a funk, if I get into a drift, like those will typically, I can pull out within a very short period of time. And I'm going to share with you that recipe. And so what happens is we want to collapse the time frame of our drift. No more drifting for a month. No more drifting even for a couple weeks. Because the reason is, and I'll share the importance of this, the reason is the longer you drift, it actually affects your performance and your identity. All this identity work that you're doing goes out the window when you start drifting. So the whole goal of staying consistent, of doing these things, is to shift your identity long term to where you start to believe you are that person, right? The money that you're making, that you are the person that makes that kind of money, whatever that may be. And so we want to shorten the drift. And so for me, like I'm going to produce a lot more results than other human beings because I drift a lot less. If you're drifting throughout the year, month at a time in different ways, and you're constantly drifting, I'm going to outperform you because I'm performing at such a high level more than you are throughout the year. Even if you're better at me than something, I'm going to have more success because I'm going to be more consistent with my performance. So we want to avoid drifting. And so we want to be aware of the triggers that happen. I was driving into the office one day and I got a call from an attorney, and the attorney let us know that we were actually about to be sued. It was going to be a $400,000 lawsuit. The client, we had done some restoration work. They said that we didn't properly dry out their house and that there's mold, and they turned it into this big thing. So instantly, right, I had fear creep in, which was a very solid emotional trigger. It threw me off. And it really threw me into a funk, otherwise known as a drift. And so it put me into a drift, and I was in a drift for probably a week, maybe a couple weeks. And then I got a call from my coach. We had a coach call regularly. It's the value of having a coach. And I was talking to Amit, who was my coach. And I said, Amit said, "Hey, Skylar, how you doing?" I said, "Man, I'm doing decent. I'm kind of in a drift right now, or I'm in a funk," was what I actually said. And he said, "Okay, well, what are you going to do to get out of it?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, what are you going to do to get out of the drift?" I'm like, "Well, I don't really understand. Like, I thought I'd just wait till the drift kind of passes. Like, you know, you just let it pass." And he's like, "Are you kidding me? You think that professional athletes that are going onto the field for a championship game, they talk to their coach and they're like, 'Hey, I'm sorry, I'm in a funk right now.' The coach would be like, 'Are you kidding me? Like, get out of the funk. Like, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to get out of the funk right now? You're not allowed to be in a funk in this game.'" And so for me, like, it was a reality check that I allowed myself to naturally get out, but part of my responsibility was to get out of my funk as soon as humanly possible. And there's a recipe for that. So when you're driving and you hit some oil, you hit some water, something happens, you start drifting, there's a proven process to get out of the drift. And so you might have to turn into it, you might have to give it a little gas. There's a couple different things that you can do to get out of a drift, depending on the drift. There's a proven process. So there's a proven process for you to get out of a drift. You don't have to stay in a funk for a week or off your game. It's actually your responsibility to intentionally pull yourself out of the drift to where you're not drifting for a month, you're drifting maybe for a couple days. And you will drift, and we understand that. And so here is the anti-drift formula. This is mine. So what helps and what works for me is when I get into a funk, when I get into a drift, and these are in no particular order, but these are some of the things that I actually do. So number one is I will pray. I'll pray, I'll say, Lord, I want to hand these burdens to you. I want to hand this anxiety to you. I want to hand this frustration, this emotion, whatever I'm feeling, Lord. I want to give this to you, Lord. So I hand this off to God. And so that's an important part for me of pulling out of a drift. Number two is journal. Journaling is really profound because what happens, the brain will continue to play things until you get it out of your head and onto paper. So I'll journal, and my journaling usually starts out with, what am I feeling? Like, what emotion am I feeling? And so I'm feeling frustrated. Well, why? And I dig into why I'm feeling these feelings to kind of come up with it allows me to create some freedom through this journaling process. So I actually gain clarity around the problem and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, but it also allows me to release. Journaling is a powerful tool. Number three is exercise. So I'll actually go and I'll work out. I'll go for a run. If I'm starting to get into a funk, I'll go hit the gym. I'll do whatever it takes physiologically to shift what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling like I'm depressed or in a funk, like I'll go move my body. Number four is call a friend. I'll actually call a buddy. I'll call a buddy. I'll call a ruck brother. I'll call my dad. And I'll be like, hey, Dad, what's up? And he'll be like, what's up, Skylar? Hey, I'm just in a funk right now. I'm off my game. And we'll just talk. And many times just by talking, like I feel better. So calling a friend, calling a family member, calling somebody that can usually lift you up when you're going through a difficult time. That's part of your responsibility as a high performer, is you have to be responsible with the state that you're in and not being in a drift for whatever your standard is. For me, my standard is less than a day. Right? That's my standard. So we want to start to collapse your time frame and have your standard be different. So calling a friend, journaling, exercising, praying. We have some people that do ice baths or stand on a nail board, something to shift their state. There's many different things that could work for you, but this is my list, and I recommend get clear on your list. What is your formula? And write it down. Have it on your phone so that when you start to get triggered, you can actually go. Sometimes I have to do all these. Sometimes I literally have to go through. There's been days where I'm like, man, I cannot get out of this funk. And so I'll literally go do all of these specific things, which will help me to pull out of the drift. And so again, my drifts are usually a couple of hours. Sometimes they might roll over into a day or 2 days, but my goal is to keep them in a short period of time. Again, because I know the shorter I can make my drifts, the better chance I have of shifting my identity and increasing the set point of who I believe that I am. So as you're journeying, be aware of a couple things. One is what it takes to shift your identity, but two is be aware of when you get triggered. Some of you guys have already been triggered today. Some of you have been triggered this week, right? What happened where you got triggered? Be aware of the trigger and be aware that that trigger most likely will send you into a drift. It's going to get you to stop doing what you know you're supposed to be doing. You get in a fight with your wife, and so you decide not to work out the next morning. Or you're really tired from work, and so you decide to not do what you know you should be doing. So be aware of the trigger, be aware of the drift, and then make sure that you have your anti-drift formula planned out for when, not if, but when that happens. I hope this was valuable to you. If you got some valuable, make sure you subscribe or like or whatever platform that you are on. Let's stay connected.